that every AA group ought to be fully self-supporting, declining outside contributions. We will now pass the basket. This is a weekly step meeting. Our format is as follows. The speaker is asked to talk for about 25 to 30 minutes on that step of the week, followed by discussion and/or questions until 7. You can find these weekly meetings on our YouTube page, the Conscious Contact Speaker Group of Doylestown. Don't forget to smash the like button, subscribe, and share. That brings us to the speaker portion of the meeting on this day, Monday, February 5th, in Doylestown, Pennsylvania, at the Monday night, 6 p.m. Stay Alive Literature and Step Group at St. Paul's Lutheran Church. Tonight's speaker is Damon, and he will be sharing his experience on Step 11. Please help me welcome Damon.
Hi, family. My name is Damon. I am an alcoholic.
Damon.
Thank you to Nick, and thanks to all of you. I love to speak for AA. I love any opportunity I can get to give back in this fellowship. I won't ever be able to feel like I've given back enough, because the catch is the more I try to give back, the more I end up receiving. And so I feel like I won't ever square that debt, right? Because the more I give, the more I get. And so I love this opportunity, and especially there's a lot of circumstances in my life right now, the details of life that from an ego standpoint, like from my perspective, I say, well, this is bad, and this is painful, and this shouldn't be happening, and this is disturbing. The reality is everything's okay. It's just I've got this, I invent this map in my head, this plan as to how the universe is supposed to be. And I go through the day trying to say that's not how it's supposed to be, and God, life, whatever you want to call it, I picture, kind of patting me on the head and saying like that's adorable, Damon, that you feel that way, but I am what I am, and it is what it is. So I always have a choice and an opportunity to do what I need to align myself with what actually is, instead of trying to bend everything to my will. So 11, I was shown so this is a step meeting. So I look at this then as it's not so much about me and my own story. It's about helping to clarify A's message, what this process is about, if there's anything from my experience that could help somebody else on their journey. And to do that, I feel like I need to kind of set the context for 11. When I first came around, I sometimes thought, I would go to a meeting over here and they would be on step 11. And then I'd go to another meeting and they were talking about step 4. And then I'd be on this one and they're on step 3. So it looked like just this random assortment of stuff. But the reality is this program is really beautifully laid out, where each step of the process builds on the last. And I don't know that I could have been capable of the action of any particular step without the ones that came before it. And I'll say too that I had a misunderstanding for a while when I first came to AA of what this was all about. Because what happened for me is I think what happens for a lot of people, which is I walked into a meeting and I was new, and so I heard somebody share, and I said, oh, okay, so now I know one thing about AA. And then the next person shared, and okay, now I know 2 things about AA. And as the meeting went on, I was gathering, this is what I understand about AA. Then I was at other meetings, got other stuff. And my understanding, or really misunderstanding, of what this whole thing is about was just based on whatever collection of stuff I happened to have heard from all these different meetings. And since you were at different meetings than I was, at different days and hearing different people, then if your understanding is the same way, then that means we could end up with wildly different ideas about what AA is. And yet I love when somebody walked me through our book, they put in there, the founders, the original fellowship, said we have a way out on which we absolutely agree. We join in brotherly and harmonious action, right? They were on the same page. And I envied that. So the impression that I had gotten that AA was about is I'm an alcoholic, and that means I can't drink safely. And so what I need to do then, so that means if I drink, I'll become powerless. And so it's my job to not drink. But that's going to be really hard. And so I come here and we'll help each other. And so if there's stuff weighing on me, I'll talk it out. A problem shared is a problem cut in half. And I'll get advice from you guys, and I'll remember, I'll hear a bunch of stories that keep it real fresh in my mind how frightening it would be to go back out there. And so I had this idea that I need to stay scared every day for the rest of my life if I want to stay sober. And the one day at a time thing, I took that to mean like I'm going to be gripping the sides of my chair and looking at the clock like, can I make it to midnight? And it was brutally depressing to me. But I was at the end of the road, and so I didn't have a whole lot of choice. You know, I stayed around because there wasn't any option. But when somebody walked me through our book and I saw like what our founders, like they had a particular experience. There were things that they were doing that they found to be like wildly successful. Like anybody that was doing it, it was working. And they said, we got to pass this on. And they wrote it down exactly as they thought that we needed to experience it, to know everything we need to know. So I had a guy, it was the day of my 3rd anniversary, started working with this guy. He had said, all right, 3 years of meetings, you're familiar with you're very familiar with the Fellowship of Alcoholics Anonymous at this point. Let's see what you know about the program of Alcoholics Anonymous. And he said, and if you want to understand a program called Alcoholics Anonymous, a book called Alcoholics Anonymous is a really good place to start. And we started walking through it. And I wound up with this wildly different idea of what this was about. I got to see that the first step, like, yes, I can't drink safely. That I identified with them talking about having a physically abnormal reaction. I put alcohol in my system, and all bets are off. Whatever my plan was as to when I was going to stop, what time, how much money I was going to spend, all those things went out the window. I've sometimes heard it said my off switch is broken, right? Like I just did, once I started drinking, it wasn't really up to me when I stopped. So yeah, I can't drink safely. But then they go on to talk more about that, and they say, well, so if we're in that position, then why do we pick the first drink up to begin with? And they go into like this whole explanation about like some of the different things that go on in our minds, but they say really don't what all these things have in common is they look like insane thoughts. Like they look like the mind of a person that's insane. And I got to see that insanity in Alcoholics Anonymous it's not that my life was insane or my circumstances were insane or the drinking was insane. If I have what they have, that means I am insane. I'm suffering from a form of insanity. And that means that's good news and bad, you know? It's bad means, well, I'll start with the good. It means that the times that if I end up picking up a drink, it wasn't that I screwed up and I was bad or stupid or careless or whatever. It means I'm suffering from something that I don't really have a choice in. The bad news in that is it means no matter how, and they say the baffling feature of alcoholism is no matter how great the necessity or wish, I'm not able to choose whether or not to drink in the long run. I could make it a day, a week, a month, who knows, you know? But that really I'm rolling the dice every day. And when I came to there, then I realized that step one is not, I'm an alcoholic, I can't drink safely. It's, I'm an alcoholic, and that means I'm going to drink again, regardless of whether or not I want to. That was the only thing then that would possibly have opened me up to step two, because I wanted nothing to do with the word God when I got here. No parts of that. And I had been kind of fighting it and reinterpreting it and stuff, up to that point. But this opened me up in a very different way. And there's a piece in the chapter We Agnostics where they talk about this stuff. See, I thought, like, if you look on are the shades in here? No. Step 2 says, came to believe that a power greater than ourselves could restore us to sanity. It makes it sound like to move to 3, I have to already believe. But then as we were reading through it together, it says a bunch of times through that chapter, as soon as somebody can believe, it says that they can believe or are even willing to believe, they've got what they need. And that was me. Like I did not believe, but I was willing to believe. I figured if I think of myself as analytical, I can't make up my mind ahead of time, let me conduct an experiment. Let me try it out and we'll see what happens. And that's how I went through the steps. So if, as I talk, I use the word God very freely now, I still think of that as there's a lot of people who use that word that would say, you don't believe the same thing I do. It doesn't matter. But if somebody struggles with that word, just know as I use it freely through this, you don't have to believe anything. It's just about, are you willing to take the actions that can put you in touch with something that can create this change, So in 3, I had to make this decision then, okay, my way does not work. Like I've got this problem, I'm beyond human aid, I can't keep myself from drinking, no human power can keep me from drinking. Oh, and by the way, step 3 introduces this idea that caused me to think about, and I kind of suck at being in the driver's seat of my own life. I go through life thinking, here's what I need to do to keep myself safe, and here's what I need to do to be happy, and here's what I need to do to create peace. And all those efforts have landed me in, face down in the dirt. I suck at knowing what I need and making it happen. So 3 is basically, it's not just a decision to go through the rest of the steps. It's a decision that my life is no longer going to be based on what my head and my heart tell me, like my feelings and my thoughts. Instead, they're going to be based on spiritual principles, and I'm going to try to turn to this power for direction. I'm going to do what I got to try to clear out a channel and follow this power's direction. Because the thing is, if I'm really living life by the direction of this power, no God that I would want any parts of would say, Damon, you know what? You're gonna drink and die today. That's my plan. That's what I want you to go do today, right? Like, to the extent that I'm following those directions, I cannot ever drink again. My take, right? So they say, okay, well, this decision is great, but you're blocked. So having that decision, you're not going to be able to make good on it. And so there's a course of action that's going to need to happen. I'm blocked. There's the channel between me and this power is blocked by the self-centered stuff, the self-perspective. So then we got 4 through 9, and that's just, that channel's got to clear out. So I had to take inventory of these are all the things that the resentments and the fears and the hurts and stuff that I'm carrying around. I got to look at that and see how it is that I've actually kind of created or worsened that stuff in my own mind. Share it with somebody else. Admit it to God. In sharing it with somebody else, I actually admit it more deeply to myself. And then through doing that, I had all this stuff, this inventory that I had done over a period of time, but now looking at it back to back to back to back to back and saying it out loud and seeing another human being looking at me as I'm saying it, I took it in a very different way. And I realized this is the stuff that's going to kill me. It makes sense that somebody carrying all of this around in their head and their heart, it makes sense that that person would need to pour as much of a toxic substance as they possibly could down their throat. And so I saw, there's no hope of me remaining sober as long as these things continue to be true in me. So that was the thing that created a shift where all the stuff that I had been hanging on to started to have just shifts in I'm willing to, I'd be willing to let that go. I don't know how to do it. I can't do it. The good news is I don't have to work on any of my defects. If I'm willing to have them gone, 7 says, okay, ask for them to be taken. And I asked for them to be taken, but there's no way for me to find out whether they're gone or that they're gone unless I'm getting up and trying to behave differently. And that's where 8 and 9 come in. All of the harms that I caused through those defects, I'm now going out and try to mend all those fences. And I'd never be able to do that if I were still driven by those defects. So it's in the act of making the amends, I get to experience, oh my God, that got taken, that got taken, that got taken, right? And in that, they, you know, and also I was always carrying the past around with me in fear of the future. So in doing that, I got to see like all that stuff is dealt with, and now I get to just be in the day. And just living today, it's not that hard. But I was always carrying my whole life with me around, you know? So so they say, okay, so at that point, then they come up to step 10, and they say, all right, at this point, like we've entered the realm of the spirit. Like we're starting to experience this conscious contact as the channel is cleared out. And I couldn't believe it. Like I went through this just willing to believe, conducting an experiment, and I started to have these experiences where, I don't know, I saw myself behaving in ways that were not me. And that would have been scary, except I liked I hated the old guy, you know? I tried to make a good case for like what a good guy he is, but I didn't really believe it. I couldn't stand myself. And now I'm seeing something different, and I'm like, wow, I don't feel guilt and shame about what this guy's doing, you know? So I started to experience more freedom. And I would sometimes sort of feel like, I don't know, like I felt like a presence or a connection. I felt a sense of safety. I felt like, yeah, my parents were flawed human beings, just like most of the other 7 billion people on this planet. Of course, they quote unquote failed me in different ways, right? But now I've got this thing I'm connecting with. And even though it still doesn't make sense today, it still doesn't make sense to me with my head. But I let that stuff go, and I say, as long as I continue to attempt seeking this power, it shows up. I experience this thing. And so now in 10, 11, and 12, I think of those as they're like the now what steps, right? Like the course of action, the main course of action that creates the change, that's done. That's when they talk about things like having recovered from alcoholism, right? Going through the world in a place of safety and security. Like I said, if I'm following the direction of this power, then I don't have to walk around scared as long as I'm not doing what this says, but I'm listening to that connection. But now what? And I love that there's a line in there, they say, you know, it's easy to let up on the spiritual program of action and rest on our laurels. And if I think about whatever meeting I go to, you know, the different meetings I go to, like, yeah, there's lots of people, when I look around, it looks like, right, like it's easy for us to let up on this and rest, you know, yeah, that's my experience. But it clicked for me one day, like that's Bill and Bob and the original fellowship, like that's the founders that are saying that, the real old timers, and I could sometimes want to put them on a pedestal and think of them as a different class of being or something. They're saying, yeah, it's easy to let up on this thing. So if I find myself doing that, then great, that tells me like I'm in good company. It's not that there's some bizarre thing happening and the whole thing was a lie. Yeah, I'm having the same kind of experience they did, but then they follow that up with, but we're headed for trouble if we're in that place. And so I got to take that seriously. So 10 is telling me, like, as I go throughout the day, I can't just like, oh, well, I left the meeting and now, like, here's my day. Like, all through the day, I'm to be reflecting on, like, here's this thing that happened. How do these spiritual principles apply to that? Here's the situation I'm about to go into. All right, let me turn for direction in this, you know. Here's this feeling that's coming up. Let me ask for it to be removed. And that's how I'm to go through the day. So now we get to 11, finally. But I feel, like I said, I feel like 11 won't make sense without that other stuff, you know, because 11. So what I talk about 11 differently than a lot of people, because, you know, we sit down to talk about 11 and it's like, okay, we're going to talk about prayer and we're going to talk about meditation. I actually think, I feel like there's a more important point in there. Because what it actually says, sought, and then it says through prayer and meditation. The book says, yeah, 11 suggests prayer and meditation, right? So that's a way to go about something. But what 11 really says is sought to improve our conscious contact with God. Prayer and meditation isn't new at this point. If I've been following the directions through that book throughout, they've been telling me to pray and meditate 1,000 different times throughout this process. That's already, and that's why I talk about like the steps being in order and there's a process. The prayer and meditation thing isn't new. I've been doing a lot of that to get to step 11. The real essence of step 11 is now that you're in this place where you have some sort of conscious contact, are you like, okay, well, I'm good now, I'll just stick it out there. They're saying, no, what they found that they needed to do is I've got this contact, I got to strengthen it, I got to deepen it, I got to get better at listening to it, I got to get better at hearing that direction, I got to get better at when I'm speaking to get out of the way and let this thing come through me and not be thinking about me and what you all think of me, so that I'm sitting here like, oh, I'm afraid to speak right now because, this isn't about me. I have, honestly, I've sucked at this over the years, 11, because there's a point where they talk about, turning in prayer meditation, and that as time goes on, we get better at it and we start to get this intuitive sense about this direction and these principles and stuff, and we've come to rely on it. And what happens in me is as I really came to rely on it being intuitive. And so something would come up and I'd go to like write inventory on it, and I'd pick up the pen and I'd be like, oh my God, I can see it. I'm in entitlement. I'm in judgment right now. I'm in grandiosity. Like I could see all the stuff. And so I'd be like, okay, I don't need to write the inventory. Or something would be going on and I'd be like, I'm not sure what to do. Okay, I should pray about it. And I'd go to pray about it and I'd go to kneel down and be like, oh my God, the answer is so clear. Of course I need to show up for this, And what started to happen is ego started to say, then you don't really need to write the inventory and turn to God in prayer, because it's intuitive now. And what's really going on is my ego wants to learn this well enough that I can turn to this power and be like, okay, I don't really need you anymore. I've got it from here on out. And I did, I started sliding into that trap. And it did not go well. Luckily this process, like when they talk about the results of clearing out this channel and turning for direction and stuff, the idea that got them freedom from the problem and that they were restored to sanity, that instead of seeing and thinking through an alcoholic mind, that they were restored to a healthy mind, So as things started to kind of unravel in my life and I was putting my hands more and more back on the wheel, I experienced a lot of pain and felt kind of hopeless about a lot of things. But throughout all of it, no matter how painful any of it was, there was never 1 second where a drink seemed any better an idea than drinking some Drano. I would need to be insane to do either of those things, given the effect that each would have on my body. And I've been restored to sanity. So I'm not in that danger. I would have been eventually, and that pain could have taken me out in different ways. I mean, so many of us, like I've seen, we might remain sober in terms of like sobriety is freedom from alcohol, right? We might remain sober, but I've seen lots of other things take alcoholics out. I mean, other substances is the obvious one, but I've seen alcoholics taken out and sometimes die through things like, addictions to food or sex or gambling, all kinds of other things. It's not like all substances are bad and then anything else goes. It's like I need to be living a life based on these principles. And if I find myself starting to turn to other things to like get outside of how I feel, distract myself, escape, whatever, I'm in danger. It's not about whether the chemical is in my body or not. It's, in fact, the term slip, Bill Wilson in the early days, like there was a guy that had they were like, what happened to so-and-so? And he said, he slipped. And I said, what do you mean he slipped? And he said, he slipped from the grace of God. You know, that it wasn't about the problem as he picked up. It's the problem was disconnecting from the power that protected him. And then once disconnected, the picking up was the next step in the chain, right? So I've got to keep at this. I've got to keep deepening this relationship, and being on the lookout for what could block me. So I'm looking at these things throughout the day, but then whatever level of contact I had, 11 is saying, okay, well now you got to seek to improve your contact. So look back on the day and see if you missed anything. Now that you're at peace and you're home and everything's slowed down, mentally run through the day and say, like, were there any periods that I missed in there where I was angry at people, I was scared, I was judgmental, I was dishonest, you know. Okay, now let me get quiet and see what was really going on there. And if there's anything that I'm going to need to apologize for, then I got to do that as promptly as I can. I should talk to somebody else about it. So I'm staying transparent, staying humble. But there's another piece. I was just talking to somebody about this the other day. That the really important piece in there to me is there's a piece where it says like about asking what corrective measures we need to take. See, I found what happened a lot of times is I would see myself, or I've seen it with other people, writing the same inventory over and over again. You know, oh, I'm mad at my sister. And then 2 days later, you know, I have this resentment against my sister for such and such. And then, you know, the next day I have a resentment, and I just keep writing it down and trying to ask for the anger to be removed. But the fact that that's coming up is a symptom of something. It's revealing that there's some kind of an attitude in me that's off. And so the corrective measures thing, it's like what I've been shown, and I appreciate this so much, is I look at, okay, this is where I was off today, and then I say, what are the actions or attitudes that I need to adopt so that it doesn't show up tomorrow? What do I need to do differently? You know, and that's been so tremendously helpful. And then as far as, you know, morning, considering my plans for the day. And, you know, it can be easy sometimes to be like, oh, okay, well, I'm going to go do this, I'm going to go do this, and I'm not really considering my plans for the day. I'm kind of letting God know, like, here's what's on my calendar for today. But I found like what's been more helpful to me, and I think the spirit of this is to go and say, okay, these are the things that I think I should be doing today, or these are the things that I want to do today, or this is what I'd like the day to look like, and then to get quiet and really open myself to, maybe I'm going to hear this nudge that says, cancel those plans and go show up for this person. Or, you know, maybe you don't need to be working this many hours a day, or maybe you don't need to be in the gym this many hours, or whatever. Like, maybe there's a way for you to be, you know, a bit more useful today, and following that. And so I've been in a period now with all this difficulty going on and stuff. Like, I'm kind of been having this renaissance of experience with step 11, where I'm really like, I got to take this seriously, because I don't want to be one of those stats. I've known a lot of people over the years, people going out at 20, 25, 30 years, whether by drinking or they died sober, but at their own hand, because they just couldn't bear to live life based on self anymore, you know. So I'm doing what I can to deepen this experience, and so much more I'd love to say about this. I'll end with this though. I can see all these things and sense these things, but unless I get up and actually put them into practice, it doesn't really do any good. And so the next piece of the puzzle then is step 12, where it's saying, okay, so now I've got to carry this message to others. My job is to transmit this stuff, not just to be of service and give rides and stack chairs and stuff. The opportunity is for me to transmit this thing to somebody else who's suffering. But then the other piece is, now that I'm looking at this stuff, I've got to practice these principles in all of my affairs. Not just the ones where it's convenient, not just the ones that don't involve money, not just the ones that don't involve my sex life. I got to try to practice these principles in all of my affairs. And I have a relationship with the power that when I screw up, because I do all the time, I'm not smacked down for it, as long as I have an honest desire to be taken to better things. So I'm looking forward to hearing from you guys. Thank you so much again for the opportunity. I hope that was helpful.
Okay, please limit your sharing to 3 minutes. Please keep your shares related to the step. If you feel like drinking, or if you've had a drink today, please see me after the meeting, or speak to somebody after the meeting. We ask you please refrain from the use of profanity. We are in a church and on a spiritual journey. The floor is now open for personal sharing, and I'll let you select. Whoever puts their hand up.